Hi, today we are going to talk about manifold gauges. So there are number of manifold gauges which are available in market, which sometimes confuse us that hey, which manifold gauge is good for us and which one is not good for us. So today we are going to review, in this video we are going to review these analog gauges. We also have a range of digital gauges, manifold gauges, but first we will cover the analog gauges. So when we talk of analog gauges, there are a number of things which we need to know before selecting what type of manifold gauge we should be looking at. So for example, let me show you. So what happens is when we are looking for typically a manifold gauge, so we have two-way or four-way. So this is a typical two-way manifold gauge. There is also single manifold gauge we will talk about. So in a two-way manifold gauge, what you will see is there are three connections at the bottom and there are three connections at the back. Now the three connections at the back are dummy connections, so they really does not make any connection. They are just to hold the hoses. So when you have these hoses lying here, so you can connect the back of the hoses, the other end of the hoses onto the back of the manifold gauge, just to secure them after the job is done. The other important part is what is the material of construction, whether it is a brass or aluminum, whether there is a side glass or not, what type of gauges are used, what size of gauges are used. So normally you will see there is a small gauge which can be a 2-inch gauge like this one versus this one 80 mm gauge. So normally a 80 mm gauge is something which is easy for you to read, so it's a slightly bigger. Then what is also important within the gauge is that what is the units available. So degree centigrade, PSI, which is most commonly used here in India, and then what are the different refrigerants. Now the significance of the refrigerants which are available in the gauge is to give you a calculation for superheat and subcool. So if you are not going to use a superheat or subcool calculation, then honestly the gauge will just, what you will be looking at is just a pressure, not the temperature. So the temperature gives you a saturation temperature of that refrigerant to calculate the superheat, and superheat is something is very important for us as a refrigeration air conditioning engineer to know for any kind of system. But yes, so that is something. Then the accuracy of the gauge, so it can be class 1, class 2. So these gauges are class 1 gauges. So class 1 gauge really talks about the 1% accuracy. So they would be having a 1% accuracy of the full rating of gauge. The another important part of a gauge, what you see in these is there would be this compound gauge which is on the suction side, which will always have some vacuum, and there is a full pressure gauge on the condenser side. Now when you see the color difference, so this green is something which is for vacuum. It is just to give you an indication whether the system is under vacuum or not. Then after the pressure, say for example here you see 350, and from 350 there is no segregation of units, and it is retard taking to 500. So what does that mean? This means that when you have reached 350, you can actually measure and count everything, whereas if accidentally it gets connected to a heat pump where the pressure was more, so then it can hold up to a pressure of 500 psi. So the gauge will not go wrong. If it is beyond 500 psi, then the gauge will get damaged. So that is the extra precaution. So normally in these yellow jacket manifolds, we try to provide whatever precautions we can take so that we handle the product safely and securely. So we talked about gauges, we talked about the material, we talked about the glass. The another thing to know about these gauges, say for example in this two-way manifold, so what you see here are these three connections. So these three connections means, say this which is blue, we connect it to the suction side of the system. This red we connected to the discharge side of the sequence or the liquid side of the system. Now whatever is getting connected here will have directly display on the gauge. So you don't need any valve to operate for this and for this. So they are directly connected. Whereas for this connection which is there, either for vacuum or for gas charging, so here with this valve you can operate, make or break this connection. So if you open this, so the gas or the vacuum will start this way, and once you open this it will also operate this way. So these two are to manage the connections of this center hose, which you can connect it to the suction side or to the discharge side. So this is a typical manifold gauge. Normally all these manifold gauge comes with a steel hook so that you can hang them on. So now let me give you idea of the very first or the initial level, which is a single manifold gauge. Now in a single manifold gauge you have just one connection, one gauge and one back dead connection. Now in this case you have this valve which operates. So if you are working on a system wherein it's only one port is available, so a refrigerator or a deep freezer or a room air conditioner also, if there is only one port available on the system, then essentially you can use just a single gauge manifold, because whatever you connect, it's going to get connected only to the system on the one port. So now in this case you connect this to vacuum, you take this port and connect this to compressor suction or to the charging port available on the refrigerator or air conditioner. Now to operate you use this valve so that you can make or break the connections. So this is a very simple one gauge manifold which is used by a lot of people. This is very cost effective because it's just one gauge, one manifold, small gauge and all that stuff. So now we come to the second type, which is series 41 manifold gauge, which is solid brass, high pressure manifold gauge. We talked about the typical features of a manifold gauge. In this we already know that yes, this is two-way manifold. You can manage both, but the center one is something which first you connect to the vacuum and then you connect it to the charging cylinder, so you can do the gas charging and all that stuff. So this is typically very common. A lot of people use this even for a refrigerator or a room air conditioner where there is just only one port available. So in that case what they do is when they are doing the vacuuming, they connect this line to the vacuum pump, this to the system, and this they connect the vacuum gauge. Now once they connect the vacuum gauge, they can read, and after doing the vacuum they just close this, remove the vacuum gauge and do the gas charging from this port. So that is also something. So they essentially use this as a T in that case. But yes, this is something which is very commonly used. There are two of these. So this one is series 41 two-way manifold, and there is also Titan two-way manifold. You can see there are again 3 ports and 3 dummy ports on the back. All that stuff similar to what you have in series 41. Series 41 was the brass one. This is something which is aluminum one, and in this you also have a side glass. Now another important thing to know about the side glass is, if you are looking for a there are 2 type of side glass type of manifolds you will get. One is this one, which is, you can see there is a brass ring attached to it, so it is physically tightened through screwing, tightened onto the gauge, onto the manifold. Whereas some of it available is a press fit. So press fit is like you press them and then they get stuck over there. So press fit is something wherein in the industry we have seen so many accidents where that press fit was actually came out with the pressure. So I avoid, I would say that if you are looking for those type of side glass type of manifold gauges, be cautious, because that may be a source of accident. So rest everything looks so this is more friendly, easy, smooth and all that stuff. So it's slightly premium level of what you have in series 41, a two-way manifold. Now we have four-way manifold from Titan, so Titan series. So now you can see in this four-way, as compared to two-way, now we have 4 ports on the bottom. Now in 4 ports in the bottom, what you have is those 2 are the similar one which you connect to the low side and to the high side, and then this is vacuum. Now vacuum is normally in these cases is something which is 3/8, so higher size. So in 3/8 it is easy for you to connect a larger dia hose to a vacuum pump so that you can vacuum the system faster. This is something which you connect to the refrigerant cylinder. Now what happens in this typical case, you directly connect both, vacuum pump as well as the refrigerant gas cylinder. So once you do that, so essentially what you're doing is you're vacuuming till the cylinder. So you don't need to change any hose while doing the gas charging. So there is no refrigerant gas emission is going to happen, and there is no chance of air getting added when you are changing the hose and doing the purging and all that stuff after the vacuuming. So in this case, this gives you a complete control of the system. So normally if you are doing a charging of a VRF system or any system where you know that hey, any kind of air or moisture is a real challenge for you, so you look for this kind of system wherein you manage that there is no air or moisture getting added while commissioning in the process. So that is where this is used. So all chiller applications, all VRF applications, all the places wherever you have both the suction and the discharge side ports, normally people prefer to use this type of manifold gauge, Titan series 4-way manifold gauge with all the features, comes very similar to what you have. For these there are multiple combination of which gases and all those things are available. The another thing, in case of a very high capacity chiller, so normally while doing with this versus doing with this, so this is Titan which has some size, and the bore of this, so the size of this brute is something which is almost twice of this. So what this does is, when you're doing a vacuuming of a chiller or you're doing a gas charging or anything, this brute makes the flow of the gas or the vacuum very, very fast. So this makes the series complete, from a very small a refrigerator to a very high capacity chiller of say 300 ton or 500 ton chiller. So all